Good evening, and welcome to the U Talk show, where we talk. Tonight, we'd like to talk about the great divides in society. Those of us of a certain age may remember that a certain time every year, everyone would be debating whether Fords or Holdens were the superior car. Those people, let's be entirely honest, would debate that every point of the year if you'd let them, but Bathurst 1000 comes around, everyone's got an opinion. Those of you who are a little younger than that, maybe you were wondering, you're building a new PC. Should you go with an Intel build or should you go with an AMD build? There are people with very strong arguments on both sides. They will provide you all the technical data you like, of course, curated to suggest that their side is the one you want to be on.
You forgot Xbox versus PlayStation. How could you, Horst? How could you?
It is a good example. Perhaps
Yeah.
you are a fan of Vegemite on your toast with breakfast,
Hashtag Promite for life.
or Marmite. This is a three-way battle here. This is getting complicated.
Okay, Marmite's
These are all
Marmite's the
things.
retarded cousin we don't talk about.
These things are all examples of identities in many respects. They are questions to which there is not a solid superior answer, and which people place far more investment in than is strictly required. The people who profit from these divisions in society are not you and I. The people who profit from these divisions in society are the Fords and the Holdens, the Intels and the AMDs, the Chromites, the Vegemites, the Marmite producers, because any publicity is better than no publicity. And unfortunately, publicity, corruption, and the pursuit of the almighty dollar pervade our public spaces at all levels of discourse. It's Pride Month, apparently. We've got some Pride merch right here. Someone sold it to me. They made money from it. Everyone's making money from outrage or from group identity. And nobody's actually really doing anything about the fact that, for instance, transgender teenagers are over 3 times more likely to kill themselves than cisgender teenagers. Because it's easier to make people be scared about who they might find in the bathroom than it is to provide a robust and resilient healthcare system that is appropriately funded. Anger is easier than policy. So we'd like to talk about identity politics, why it's bad for you, why it's bad for me, why it's bad for marginalized people, why it's bad for unmarginalized people, and why it's very, very good for business. Kyle.
Well, first things first. In this, what's this, a three-parter we have plans?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. And so we're analyzing identitarianism. But first we have to identify this.
Even identitarianism has an identity.
Yeah, I saw the play on words there right as I was saying
It's
it, and not a
insidious.
moment before it.
It's everywhere.
First, we have to identify the problem. Okay, what is the identity of this identitarian identifier? Okay, I can't fit any more identity words into that. But
You know what?
hey,
I was doing some mathematics stuff recently, and it was talking about like trigonometric angle sum identities. And I've looked at this and I've just gone, my God, it's even invading the arithmetic.
yes. But okay, so instead of us making jokes about the word identity, let's actually discuss identitarianism. What is it? What is identity politics? We hear a lot, and we've heard a lot from Horst there. And in some ways, I think Horst, you kind of hit the nail on the head, but you also missed, I guess, the point that I would like to make, perhaps intentionally.
Yes.
But the point there's several points that I'd like to make, but first things first, what is it? Well, it's essentially tribalistic politics. So tribalism, like, that's a different tribe. That's
Us
you
versus
know,
them, the way it always
yeah,
has been.
yeah, us versus them. As I once so kind of colorfully put it, ooh, 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 not from family tribe, you bad. Ooh. So that's how I put it the first time. So essentially, it's tribalistic
Hey, at least it's
politics.
not Tasmania. You're not from family tribe. You undateable.
Oh, yep. Well, that's why they have second heads over there. Anyway,
Hey, I met a Tasmanian recently. I assure you, she had exactly the typical number of heads,
that you would
give or
expect from
take.
a Tasmanian. So yeah, so now that we've wasted half an episode already, like just joking around about it, um, let's yeah, so it's tribalistic politics that is based solely on arbitrary markers of identity, such as race, religion, gender, and sexuality. And it
Yep.
is often marked by a complete lack of any solutions and a complete lack of any real substance. It both begins and ends at those arbitrary markers of identity. Again, race, religion, gender, sexuality, typically. Some may be a little bit surprised to find religion in there because religion usually comes from with like a doctrine, an ideology. This is how you live life and all that. And well, yes, it's still something like what 90% of people die as a part of the same religion that they're born into.
Hmm.
So it is very much just a sort of um,
Though
a
with the people
product
born
of.
into cults, you have to deal with like the outliers. For instance, yeah, if you
Yeah.
have cults with like group suicide pacts, obviously those
Oh
people
yeah,
die
that's
way
a
too young for that data to be meaningful. So
yes.
let's say
Although that's a bit of
89%
a
instead of
different issue.
90%.
Sure, sure. But yeah, that being said, let's I have in my notes here to, go with some historical examples. And I'm gonna go with everyone's favorite historical example to use on literally anything, especially in the debates around identity politics, which is the Nazis. The Nazis had a very identitarian philosophy, which was we are the white Aryan race and therefore we are superior. Why are we superior? Because we're the white Aryan race. And it's just that kind of circular logic. You are
So
you are
I
that
was
race, therefore superior, therefore, you know, and
I'm
you're
going to point
superior because
out
you're that race.
I'm going to point out that even past the "we are the champions, my friends," um, in the camps, you were assigned labels based on what you're in for. Purple triangles for religious objectors, often Jehovah's Witnesses. Pink triangles if you were homosexual. There was, of course, the Star of David for Jews.
Mm,
Those are the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. But
yeah,
even even in the
but
camps, identity was used to separate people in part so that they could not mount any effective resistance.
interesting point actually. Didn't think of that. But yeah, but basically
We're
what
not coming for your pronouns. We just want you to participate in politics.
yeah, specifically to participate in real politics, or at least what I would call real politics and what everyone else would just call politics. Um, so the thing is though that what happens there was even though he was crazy enough to believe in himself, um, what Hitler and what many of his associates did was they used this whole um, this whole identitarian narrative to fuel people's outrage, get them to do what they want them to do, and that ultimately took the world to war. They were able to start a world war because they basically created this narrative in order to gain power, hold on to power, and then use that power. It was all about,
There's more to it than that, but certainly it was a
there's
large
more.
part.
Yeah, there is more to it. I mean, um, there was also the what's it? Mine's blanking out right now. The whole idea of the, German pride, he was saying he'd make Germany strong again, especially after the defeat in World War One. People were very susceptible to that. In
After the
a way,
Treaty of Versailles, they
yeah, yeah,
really, really,
yeah.
yeah.
And then there was the hyperinflation in the economic crash of 1929.
Interestingly,
The
we saw
Great
the same
Depression,
thing in Italy in the 1930s, where a
when
loaf of
Mussolini
bread
come
could
to
set
power.
you back 1 million lira.
Right, yeah, yeah. And
Mm,
and that's when I believe that's when Mussolini came to power.
yes.
Yeah, so
Something, there's no food on the tables, but at least the trains are running on time.
yeah, yeah. And so, there was the whole essentially they used the narrative as a kind of as a kind of cheap and effective method of getting people to buy into this narrative. It's all their fault. We can fix it because we know it's their fault. Whatever it
Okay.
is. Kind of like the
I'd like to
Chinese
just
century of
clarify something
humiliation.
here, right?
Hmm?
Because we've obviously gone into Godwin's law territory a little bit. I'd like to
A little bit.
clarify. We are not saying that the Nazis were bad because they used identity politics. We are not saying
No.
identity politics is bad because it was used by Nazis. We are, however, saying that it
Identity politics
functions
can be
in a
used as
way
a
that it
tool.
has fundamentally always functioned to
Hmm.
sow division and to reduce the ability of the people to meaningfully change their society.
Hmm. Yeah, and bringing it to more modern times,
Yep.
say in China we have this, century of humiliation, as this great big narrative. When if you actually look at Chinese history, they've had outside invaders every couple of hundred years. Just it's a regular occurrence for outside invaders to basically come in, you know, take over, and usually they would
Get
establish
wrecked.
themselves. Yeah,
Get
basically
wrecked eventually.
China would get wrecked, but usually the invaders would set themselves up as a ruling class and then just kind of fade into the populace, like
That
just kind
said,
of
I
meld into it. But
during the
Europeans didn't really.
Sino-Japanese conflict, I think it was, you had the issue of the Kuomintang and the Chinese Communist Party as two separate forces within China.
Hmm,
And this is a case where the threat was, for once, not external. This was a
yeah.
case where we saw a society
Well,
bifurcated along what the Chinese Communist Party depicted as class lines and what the Kuomintang um, basically painted as a loyalty question.
yes and no, because essentially that was a warring states period.
Yes, that's sort of what I'm
With
getting at, but it
Yeah, and
also was
a
an
lot of the
identity
warlords
problem.
weren't. Yeah, but a lot of the warlords were only very loosely associated with one side.
Mm-hmm.
It was more or so like a warring states period with a system of alliances rather than straight up identitarianism being. I mean, it was there, it was present, but it wasn't like the deciding. Well, kind of was the deciding factor
Can't
at the
have a
end, but
romance of the three kingdoms when you only have two kingdoms.
kind of, yeah, yeah. I'm looking for a word here, but I can't find the word. But essentially, it was a warring states period, um, with all the warring states eventually sort of just declaring for one side or another side based on
Yeah,
who could give them the best deal.
but
Um,
let's look further ahead than China though. Let's look at now.
yeah. Well,
Like
I was
right
actually going to
now
look
in
at
the
Australia.
US.
Well,
Let's look at the US for just a moment first.
hmm.
I made
Keep an eye. We've run
reference.
way over time.
I think it's worth it for this.
Okay.
I think we're sort of rapidly coming to the point. Right in the US, people are seeing scare tactics fundamentally leveled. Um, I mean, no, I'm using it. I'm using my F bomb. For fuck's sake. Right now, the US is trying to assign identities to clumps of cells to reduce the
Yeah.
rights of a class of people, those being women, on the basis of sex.
Mm. Yeah.
It's a clump of cells. It doesn't have a psyche. It can't have an identity. And
Yeah.
And yet, if you give a clump of cells an identity, suddenly you have a public discourse where you can say, won't somebody think of the identity because it helps you retain power?
Yeah. And on that though, actually, although it can be treated as an identitarian issue, you can also treat the issue of abortion as a more practical issue, as
Yes,
more of a
absolutely.
humanist
It's
issue
not an identity
about
issue, it's
human
a
rights
human
rather
rights and
than
medical care issue.
yeah. And so, it's as an issue of healthcare and human rights, you could look at it in essentially the way of when is the essentially what matters more, and if they matter equally, where does one end and the other begin? Now, I kind of argue that they kind of matter equally, the life of the child and the life of the mother. However, or the life of the woman, you know, and and the where it sort of begins and ends is where the child is viable or where the fetus becomes a baby. Because before I think it's about 22 weeks, give or take a couple of weeks, because
Yep,
essentially
because
it
modern
varies a
medicine
lot.
is weird.
Yeah, it varies a lot, and it's yeah, biology isn't it isn't like a
The,
standard template that repeats
but
itself. It changes a lot.
the science tells us that before this period of time, what you have can't live outside of a host. It is a parasite, not a child.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
parasite's a bit of a
sorry,
harsh way of putting it, but I do get what you're saying. Yeah,
any of you clucky folks in the audience who are looking forward to having a kid of your own one day, I hate to tell you, but for the first few months, it's a glorified tapeworm. It does become very cute later on, and you can like dress it up, and then it'll go to school, and you can be proud of its achievements. But for those first few months, it's a tapeworm.
I mean, that's harsh, but also kind of not wrong. So
Look,
I'm a
I was a
bit
tapeworm once upon a time, and so were you, Kyle. We got lucky. Our little brains managed to develop, and we
yeah.
became slightly less parasitic.
Yeah, so essentially the idea is it's not identity politics if there is a practical issue on the table. If abortion is one example, and there are many others. Um, but basically, if the issue is not actually about identity, and if you're not focusing on any identity, and you're talking about very practical matters, then it's not identity politics. But if the focus is on an identity, on one or more identities, then and really nothing else, then not only are there no solutions, but again, that's essentially where identity politics is.
I'll
It's
put it
just
this
focusing
way:
on that and nothing else.
anyone not having equal rights is identity politics. Anyone who is not given equal rights because they are a damn human, you are having your identity used against you for no
Yes,
good reason.
yes, but then there's also the flip side where people can use others' identities for their own personal gain, even if it doesn't technically hurt the
Yeah,
people.
pride
You know,
merch.
yeah, Pride merch, or what is it, Gillette ad? I heard something a while back about some razor ad reel then or something. I didn't watch it myself. I don't watch TV, so there's that
The
as
guy
well.
who shot at all of the Bud Light cans. I mean, that guy was doing us a favor. Budweiser, well, the Budweiser that is sold as Budweiser in the US is
Absolute trash.
it's like
That's
making
that's
love
what
in a
I hear.
canoe. It's like making love in a canoe. That's what I've heard.
That, that just seems ill advised.
It's fucking close to water.
Okay. Yep. All right, we've gone way over time. Um,
We have.
so
But
we'll
now
we'll
I think we can start this from a perspective of saying we're not coming for your pronouns. We want everyone to have equal and inalienable rights.
yeah,
And we think that the media attention on specific identities, especially the fear mongering, damages us all.
yes. All right. With that, we'll get into that next couple of episodes. For now, thank you and good night.
Good night, all. See you next time.